Good day and welcome to NACTV's Coffee Chat. Today it's our pleasure to welcome our local MLA from the constituency of Agassiz. Needs no introduction, Eileen Clarke. Thank you for joining us and taking the time to be with us here on Coffee Chat at NACTV today.
Thanks, Lyle. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's kind of a great day anyways because the kids are back to school, and I feel like we as a community have a new start too, so it's a good day in Manitoba.
It is, and there's been so many things happen since the last time we talked on this program. And the first thing was being your health. You were recuperating from a fall down the legislature steps, the staircase. How has that recuperation been? Are you fully recovered?
Well, I'm doing well. I'm wearing shoes, so that's a real positive. But fully recovered, no, it still swells up a lot depending on what I'm doing, and it seems it has an emotional side to it. If I'm a little stressed, it swells quickly. Mm-hmm. So, but the surgeon said 1 to 2 years, and we're just about at that 2 year or the 1 year mark. 1 year. So, but anyways, I'm just grateful I can get around and grateful for the care that I got when it happened. So it slowed me down a whole lot, and maybe that was a good thing. Sometimes you need to just take a step back. So all good.
So it's a lot better than it was a year ago.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah.
The other on the personal note is your mother has had some health challenges, and how is she doing?
She's doing well. It's hard to believe. She's 90 years old and always been in good health, but she was diagnosed with bowel cancer just over a month ago. Since that time, she's had a very major surgery. She has recovered remarkably, and I think it's for all the prayers that were said for her and for us. And she has been a resident in Third Crossing Manor since last Friday, and she's very happy to be there, happy to be home community, and just lucky that she was able to get a room as quickly as she did, and also to get the surgery as quickly as she did. And we have nothing but praise for our healthcare system, the doctors, the nurses, and everybody else that's involved. We have been through the whole gamut in a month, and now we have kind of sadly cleaned out her apartment, and we're on to the next phase in life. But my dad was also in long-term care for a bit, and he was extremely happy there. Yeah. I'm just grateful that both parents at their ages are of very clear minds. Yes. And he was right till the end too. So there's a lot to be said for that.
And with our experience with Third Crossing Manor, it's a very comfortable place for
It is, and she got the best room ever. It looks right out on the flower courtyard, just like the room in Neepawa Hospital here did. Yeah. So she feels very, very fortunate, and we do as well.
Well, the next big change I think our viewers are interested in is your change and your resignation from being the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. There was certainly some mixed emotions, a lot of mixed emotions. Your integrity, your faith, and your goodwill towards people certainly come out strong from what we heard throughout the constituency, Eileen. And I think the reason for your departure, I would like to hear your clarification and the job itself. Was the job too tough, or was it under the circumstances you were working?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that, Lyle, because I feel that the people of Manitoba do deserve a little bit more explanation, and it is not something that would typically happen for an individual to step down from a very esteemed position in a government. I didn't get up that Friday morning expecting to resign my position. I won't say that I hadn't been thinking about it. I'd been frustrated for quite a while, and my family was aware that I was struggling with some of the decisions that were being made in government, not necessarily by our cabinet, but by the Premier. And the inclusion of our cabinet or caucus was not always there. There was not an opportunity for discussion, and sometimes even with discussion, the information that came forward from the discussion or the views and opinions that were shared were not being heard. I do understand that when you have a caucus of 35 individuals, there's a lot of different opinions and things have to be discussed. And I mean, that's a lot to come to a decision with.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I do respect that, but within my portfolio, you say, was it a tough portfolio? Absolutely not. And the Premier did mention on TV that it was a tough job. I never, ever, from day one, found it as a tough job, not even when I had municipal and Indigenous. I had to work really hard to learn. I always like a challenge. That wasn't a problem. But the work that I had been doing and the things that had been accomplished, although the public maybe didn't always see it, I felt was very significant. And looking back when I did resign, I felt that we had really moved forward in Manitoba with relationships with the Indigenous people. And they also felt that. They expressed that. But I also realized we had a very long way to go. But one of my frustrations, and I don't mind sharing it, is I was to the point where I felt we needed to do more, and we did need to do more. My colleagues were very good in engaging with Indigenous leadership. The past couple of years as well, there was some really good meetings and dialogue going on and a good understanding, but we could only go so far, and then there was barriers from allowing us to complete, where we felt we needed to be. So that was a challenge. That part was tough, but it wasn't the part about dealing with or working with Indigenous people. That wasn't difficult. I find them to be, for the most part, very humble, very thankful to engage with us, and just wanting to be a part of Manitoba and to be treated with equality, to be treated with respect, and there has to be a trust. I completely felt that trust and respect with me was there. But if I'm really doing my job well, that trust and respect has to be appreciated and recognized by the whole government. Government as whole. It has to be staying there, because MLAs come and go. We are there for a short time only. Government continues on forever. And I think with 2020 being Manitoba's 150th, 2021 being the 150th for the First Nations and the treaties with Canada, to me was a very significant event. To the 7 nations that were a part of that, signatories to that, their forefathers, it was a really important event. I was invited to attend that. Unfortunately, I had resigned by then. I didn't get to go. But the Premier declined the invitation to go. They were hurt by that. It was not respectful. In Manitoba, that should have been a very significant event. That should have been a very high priority. If it had been any other dignitaries or whatever, it would have been respected as such. That was a significant factor. But that's kind of how it was with everything. And there was just a lot more work that I could have accomplished, but there were barriers. And I didn't feel it was fair. For the Indigenous people of Manitoba, they needed to be treated more respectfully. And I have to say, Premier Pallister always treated me personally with the utmost respect, always. Yes. And I appreciated that, because he didn't always treat everyone else that way, even my colleagues. But if he does not respect the people I'm representing in government, whether it's constituents or the Indigenous people of Manitoba, then he's also not respecting me. So I was frustrated, and what was expressed to the media sometimes wasn't always the conversation behind closed doors in our confidential meetings. But I get to hear both.
Yes.
And if they don't align, then it becomes very confusing. What is our actual goal? Where are we hoping to go? And there were a few incidents that did not sit well with me. I will be truthful. I voted in favor of Bill 56 feeling pressured into voting for Bill 56, which was the bill
Bill 56.
in regards to smoking within the VLT lounges on First Nations.
Oh, yes.
And as a province, we really don't have jurisdiction on that because they are on federal land.
Yeah.
And, it was indicated that this was for their best health. Well, if it was for their best health, they should be putting out non-smoking programs for all Manitobans, because we have a lot of Manitobans whose health is not good because of smoking, and it causes our healthcare a lot of money. There's
Yes,
no
it
doubt
does.
about it. But that's all Manitobans. I felt guilty voting in favor of that bill, and I did it in the privacy of my own department because they were virtual at that time because we couldn't be there. It bothered me from that night forward, and it still does. I disrespected First Nations people by not supporting them on that. And I also knew that Bill 64 was coming. I knew that the people of Agassiz, the school divisions, I'd met with them all, were very dissatisfied. They asked me directly, was I going to vote for that? And I said, yes, as a cabinet minister, that was the expectation. If this is a bill our government is putting forward, and typically that's regardless of which government's in power, you typically do not vote against your own government. But I was very aware that the people in Agassiz as well as around the province were very unhappy with us as individual MLAs and our government as a whole, that we were going to push Bill 64 through,
Yep.
just because that's the way it was. That did not sit well with me, because if I'm truly representing the people in Agassiz, I need to be their voice, not my own necessarily, or dictated to by the party what should happen. That was playing heavy on my mind, very heavy.
It's interesting you mention that, because during our last coffee chat, Bill 64 come up, and we could sense your apprehension of voting for it, but deep down you said it's probably going to go through, or the possibility of it going through is very likely. Now, at this point in time, has that bill been taken off the table by Premier Gertson?
It was. The day he was first in as Premier, Premier Kelvin Gertson took it off the table. He was aware that our caucus, that was our unanimous decision within our caucus. What would have happened had I voted individually against Bill 64? The Premier in all likelihood would have removed me from cabinet. That would be almost expected. I would be expecting that. And that would be disgraceful. I would disgrace the whole PC party as well as the government of Manitoba by voting against. I also knew from discussions, private discussions, that I had colleagues that were also contemplating voting against it. If 8 of us had voted against it, we would have brought the government down, which again is very disgraceful. That is, it should not happen. There should be enough discussion ongoing that if things aren't progressing well with a particular bill, that you take it back and take a relook at it.
Yes.
So there was a lot of discussion going on behind the scenes, a lot of unhappiness, not just myself. And so consequently, I chose to go my own path. Nobody knew that I was resigning. I didn't know that till noon that day. And as most days, I went and had coffee with my mom at 3 o'clock. My sister from Alberta was there. And at one point I got up and I said, I've got to go. There's something I have to do. And my mom looked at me and kind of questioning, and she said, okay. And I called her later to tell her that I had resigned, and she wasn't surprised because she knew how much I was struggling. And I felt good about doing it by myself. I didn't tell my husband till he got home that evening. He didn't know, no one knew. But the moment I had done it, I felt a huge sense of relief, because I was getting to the point I couldn't look at myself in the mirror and feel good about what I was doing. I was not being true to myself. I wasn't being true to the people that I was representing, and that's not my way.
So it had nothing to do with the workload?
It had nothing to do with the workload. I work really good under a little bit of pressure. The more I have to get done, the more I get done. And No, nothing with the workload, nothing with the quality of the work. I loved working with the Indigenous people of Manitoba. I can be honest and say I really miss it, but I do not regret my resignation. I did not ever expect that my resignation 8 months later would equate to the Premier also leaving his position. It just started a domino effect. I literally had well over 1,000 emails, comments, phone calls, cards, you name it, all positive about my resignation. I had correspondence from all across Canada, and one that really resonated was the First Nations in BC, and their chief planner, they're a very progressive reserve. Their chief planner actually used to work with the city of Winnipeg. He had met me on occasion, and he was so proud to tell his chief and council that he knew this minister, and they actually sent me a letter congratulating me. And even a lot of the folks from Sandy Bay, which is in my constituency, individuals, down-to-earth, normal people that I know, thank you for standing up for us. That gave me a great sense of pride, because they felt that nobody ever stood up for them. And I did it for me, but it seemed like it resonated as the right thing to do. I did not expect that. It was absolutely overwhelming. It was very emotional. It's taken me up until yesterday to kind of get past that. And I don't want to say I'm proud of it, but I do not have regrets. I did the right thing. And a lot of people ask why my colleagues didn't support me and do the same thing. We need people in government running the affairs of the government and the province every day. I had acknowledgement from almost every one of them, appreciating what I did. What I did actually resonated with all my colleagues, not just cabinet, beyond all MLAs. So a difficult transition for me, for my colleagues, for the province of Manitoba. It leaves people in Manitoba questioning what's next. You know, there's just so much going on. We've got a federal election. We're still dealing with COVID. It's been a really difficult summer with drought. Lots of concerns, lots of stress. But you know what? In regards to Manitoba's current government, it's looking much brighter today. So it's good. And
it's obviously that you have a clear mind of your decision, and you, like you say, no regrets. And I can share this with you, Eileen, with my involvement with Circles of Reconciliation and the Indigenous peoples. They have the greatest of trust and respect for Eileen Clarke as their minister. They had when you were the minister, and in talking to some since, they still have that trust and respect, and I think they admire your integrity for stepping forth and making the decision that you did.
Well, I appreciate that. But I also realize that I don't need a title of a minister to do good work within our government. There is still a lot of good work that I can do in regards to reconciliation, just in regards to respect for all people and truth. You know, it's truth and reconciliation. And to have trust, there has to be truth. So that doesn't change, and that doesn't need a title.
You will continue to work with truth and reconciliation with the Indigenous people, whether you're minister or not, then?
We can do that every day of our lives. You don't have to be in government to do that. Each individual in Manitoba and beyond can do that.
Senator Murray Sinclair indicated that it's something we have to work on every day.
That's the way we should live. We shouldn't have to work at it. It's just should be who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. In terms of the future with the Manitoba government, we're 2 years away from an election. We're a month, 2 months away, I guess, from having a new premier, one way or the other. What is Eileen Clarke's future within the new government and over the next 2 years?
Well, that's a good question, and I can tell you I've had lots of ideas running through my mind and lots of suggestions from other people. 2 months ago, I would have considered not running again for sure. That was definitely top of my mind because with the frustration and I wouldn't say aggravation, but I just didn't feel that I I was serving the people of Manitoba to the best of my ability. I was doing my best, but it wasn't playing forward. So I probably would not have considered that. I had a great day in the constituency yesterday with the candidate Heather Stephenson for the leadership. And I have to tell you, being back on the back roads of Agassiz and traveling with Jody and Heather Stephenson and Grant Jackson, we had absolutely a great day. And, you know, it really rekindled the flame inside me that says, you know what, this is the right place. People need representation. People need the truth. And people need to be respected. And although I had many calls to be the candidate running for premier, I don't in any way feel I'm qualified to do that. You have to have a lot of very good skills. You have to have, I don't think I'm tough enough for that. I think you've got to have, no, I wouldn't say thick skin, but you know what? You've got to be able to kind of let things go sometimes and pick your battles. As I think Heather said yesterday, you've got to pick your battles. And I know that her 21 years in government, that kind of experience is essential. I think you've got to have been there, and I have not been there. My job, I shouldn't even call it a job, but as Minister of Indigenous Relations and Northern Relations, I had a very, a softer side of government, which really suited me. You know, I didn't have to work at it. It was just, it was just within me, so it was good. But to be the Premier of Manitoba, you have to have a very wide skill set, and I don't have that. It takes a lot more than resigning from a position to make a good premier. And that's why I respect Heather Stephenson the way I do, because I know she has the skill set that's required. So
you are supporting Heather in the upcoming leadership race, and you've expressed your confidence in her, and you're looking forward. Does that mean that you might be part of her caucus, do you think, or would you be open to that? If
at this stage, you know, I look forward to her being elected. It was interesting yesterday in one of our visits. We had 5 communities across Agassiz, and one of the questions was, why were you not out there when you know, Heather announced that she was going to be running? All your colleagues were there. I believe 24 had signed on with her then, and the question was asked, why weren't you there? And that I was happy to answer that, because that's a valid question, you know, because I'm supporting her now. But a lot of people indicated that, you know, whoever I supported, that's who they would support. That's appreciated. That made me feel good that they respected my decision. But I really felt that whether it was Heather or any other, at that time we had 2 other colleagues that were considering it, and I felt they needed to go out and present themselves. People needed to see them for who they were. And that's why I did not, I've been called several times to put my signature with Heather, to stand with her that day. She really would have appreciated that, and she respected my decision. And of course, that's right at the time too when my mom was going through her surgery, and she had to be my priority. But I said, you know, the time would come when I felt I would be able to speak openly about who I would support. And I waited for the time. Well, in that time, two of our colleagues stepped down and decided not to run. And it was clear in my mind. I spoke with Heather, and she knew what my frustrations were. She knows what I stand for. I think she always has, because we've worked well together. And I sensed a lot of what I feel and what I'm hearing in, whether it's Agassiz or beyond, because I do work a lot throughout the province, were the values that she held very strongly as well. And she's not overly aggressive, but she stands her ground when she has to. And you know, she said very respectfully on TV that she had been working behind the scenes, which we all were, because other ministers also were not always able to carry forward what they felt should go or happen within their departments. It wasn't just me, it was broader. So she has those values. I know that she's hardworking. She's a very compassionate person, but she's the one that can be tough when she has to. And that's really good. But so I waited until she had really put herself out there, and she has been widely interviewed and assessed by the media, which isn't always good. But spending the day in Agassiz, I went home last night and I felt so positive about my decision. You know, you can feel it in your heart when you know it's right. And I woke up this morning with a whole new appreciation for government and a new sense of energy, mentally, physically, and that's a good day.
Well, that's good to hear. And I'm thinking that your experience as a cabinet minister and your experience in the municipal government and the Association of Municipalities across the province, you have a lot of connections. I'm kind of thinking, Eileen, that you might be quite an asset to Heather Stephenson if in fact she becomes the next premier of Manitoba.
That's down the road. That, you know, I never expected to be appointed as a cabinet minister in 2016 even. And I still have a really strong working relationship with municipalities in Manitoba. And, you know, we call each other back and forth often. They're still a great resource for me. And now with the Indigenous group too, I've been invited to a couple of events since that, you know, as an individual, not as minister, but just because they want me to come. And 2 of them have been memorial services for people that have passed away, and it was a huge honor because the first one I was at, they could only have 50 people. And I was invited to be one. He was a security guard at the Legislative Building and died very young at 55. And the family invited me. They wanted me to be there because he thought I was all right. So that really feels good.
It says a lot for your trust and respect that they have for you, doesn't it? I'm just thinking in the upcoming federal election, it would appear that we have quite a number of Indigenous peoples running for to be an MP in the federal. Do you feel, Eileen, that their voice is getting stronger and that their confidence is coming out and they're standing up for what they think more?
I absolutely do. And that's the change that I've seen in the past 5 years. Because, you know, with my staff, we established very early on with the Indigenous leadership that it was our responsibility, because they'd never had a working relationship with government before, and that we needed to help to educate them, to tell them, you know, how our government operates. How we operate is very different than the values that they operate as chief and council, for instance, or the Métis Federation. We've got different governance models, but we have to find a way to make those work together. And we were going in that direction. But I know of one individual from Cross Lake, Cree Nation, Pimachikamak. Her name is Shirley Robinson. She's been a councillor there for many years, and she is running for the Liberal Party in the federal election, which would be against Nikki Ashton, who's been there a very long time.
A long time,
And I think they've always basically considered her, her representation respectable. Nothing against that, but they would like one of their own in a First Nations woman in there. And they're really supporting her very strong. I'm going to really be watching that election because I think it's really good. And that's within our Manitoba government. That's what we need to establish. That's the level that we need to get to, where they're at the table prior to making decisions, not afterwards. And I was really happy to hear Premier Gertson announce just this week about land recognition before we start our session each day. And that's been on the table for a long time. And was being blocked.
It sounds so simple,
but
to their culture,
it's really important.
It's important.
It's a high level of respect. So it's those simple things that were being blocked that really bothered me. And so it wasn't something that happened in 1 week or 1 month. It had been continuous. And to hear Premier Gertson announce this week, and I mean, we did have a discussion about that. He didn't do it on his own. We had a really robust discussion on that a week or so ago. And that makes me feel really well. That makes me feel that this is a government now that is going to be more transparent, a government that is going to be more inclusive, and that's what we need. We need to show strong leadership by way of action. We have to show that, and I feel confident.
So speaking of racism and inclusiveness, do you feel within your heart, Eileen, that there has been progress in the last number of years within our province, both provincially and federally, in terms of racism and inclusiveness?
I'll only speak provincially because that's my kind of my knowledge base. I think it has. I think I try in my Facebook post to include, most respectfully, some of the experiences that I've had. And when it was announced about the grave sites in BC, in Kamloops, and I spoke to it on my Facebook page, and I think it really opened a lot of people's hearts. I know for a fact that I knew about reconciliation or residential schools, but not in depth. And I have been reading and learning over the last 5 years. I've met with so many people, and they're quick to say, I'm a residential school survivor. And I always try to expand that conversation. Sometimes it couldn't go anywhere because it just stopped within them. They didn't talk about it. But I met different ones that would say, you know what, it's never been talked about, but we can talk about it now. We can talk about it now, how many years later? But I mean, this was still happening not that many years ago.
Not many years.
And I know even within family or friends, I still hear, well, let's get over it. It's past, it's done. No, it's not over and it's not done. Because working with murdered and missing Indigenous women inquiry that went on, I was there from day one, and seeing the results and what has happened and how it's been dealt with. There's so much work to do. And I have to say, our justice ministers in Manitoba have come so far in making changes to, for the families, for the victims, and for the survivors. And I'm so proud of our government for those changes. But in regards to residential schools, there is a need, and I mean, this came up in cabinet, and it was public knowledge that at a cabinet meeting, and there was talk about it because different governments were putting X number of dollars into residential school, whether it was to find the graves or to work through different aspects of it. Yeah. And our government was silent again. Once again, our government was silent. This didn't sit well with me. And I had to ask at a cabinet meeting when we'd had the discussion, and they really kind of were sitting on it. And National Indigenous Day was about a week or 10 days away. And I said, please, we need to do something. This is significant. We need to do something. And nothing more was said. And I thought that was it. Well, 2 or 3 days later, I did get a phone call from the Premier's office staff, and they were working on something. And I was beyond elated about that. And they did come forward. But it really needs to, again, this is where our government needs to take leadership and say, you know what, we stand with you.
Yes, yeah.
We're not in front of you, we stand with you. We're not making your decisions. It was to work with you, for you to take, leadership. We'll be there, but we will be there. And I hope that continues, because that is the basis of murdered and missing Indigenous women. It is the basis of drug addiction. It is the basis for crime. And until we resolve and can all learn to live and accept and recognize that residential school was not a good thing. No, as a province, as a country, we won't move forward in a way that we can positively, full-heartedly work and live and play together. So it's significant.
I think you and I have talked about the fact of education and what an important role it plays with reconciliation and the understanding of let Indigenous people understand who we are and we can understand them. I was quite impressed with the local teachers here are in search of an elderly Indigenous person to come to the classroom and talk about the method of teaching by word of mouth instead of by written word as we're used to. They still use the elder to the next generation, and it's worked for them for thousands of years. So in terms of what you and I learned about residential schools and Canada's history, I don't remember learning anything about residential schools. Did you take anything in your?
No. But I did, when this came out, because there's racism exists. And I mean, there's a lot of frustration about, when it comes to protests and, what happened July 1st at the Legislative Building, where there's built up anger and that. You have to learn to understand where that anger comes from. And let's face it, there is vandalism, there is crime, and all sorts of things from all different generations and all different cultures. It exists. There's some of that will never change. There's just a certain number of people that are just bad people for different reasons too, but there's a certain number of people that are going to go against the grain no matter what. No matter how hard we try, we will never fix everything 100%. But as far as education, no, I knew when Bob and I were first in business in 1972 that there was a residential school at Sandy Bay. I knew there was nuns there. We talked about it often. Bob is Catholic, very aware, told me always how nice the nuns were there and helped, with funerals. They helped with lots of things. Certainly no bad vibes coming from that. But I mean, in the last 5.5 years, I've learned quite differently. And, I didn't realize it was, I didn't even think of residential schools beyond Manitoba. I didn't know how many residential schools. Either. But I had a call from over on the western side of Manitoba at that time from a municipality, from the CAO. They had a residential school. There was still remnants of that building in their downtown area, close to businesses that had built. They built around those remnants. They respected them. And he said that they had a burial plot, they were aware of that, and they had a ceremony there. The community had arranged a ceremony, and many came back to it. And he said it was such a good time because there was discussion, and the community was recognized for holding this ceremony sacredly. But he said too, now when this all came out, and it was always kind of aware, people were aware that they had these remnants of a building and they built around it. And Lot said, just clean it up already. And he said now they're very proud as a community that they respected what had happened enough to leave the mark, that it was there. I had a call during that time from the town of Nipawa. Someone had left orange handprints in different locations in the community. And they said, how do we deal with this? What do we do? And I said, leave them there. Leave them there. To somebody in your community, this matters. And I said, it's an awareness. And I said, if you would consider it, leave them there respectfully. Yeah. And they asked me the same thing on the monument in Winnipeg. Yeah. When do we remove these hands? And there has been discussion. Maybe those hands shouldn't be removed. Those represent children, respectfully. Yeah. And we need to be more aware. We need to work through it. It needs to happen. So education is one of the key factors of opening our minds and understanding. And for our generation, Eileen, there's a lot of people our age that are going to they have difficulty opening their mind and understanding. And I can respect that. Yeah. But I think there's hope. Do you see hope within the younger generations as we go down now to 2 or 3 generations? I think if we approach it the right way, in a respectful way, and use it as education, I think it's no different than, when we're talking about residential schools, reconciliation. I think if we've learned anything during COVID, people don't want things just shoved and pushed at them and say, you will, no matter what, learn this, do this, do this, do this. People are kind of done with that. But I think it's in the way it's approached. And I found on my Facebook posts, I posted about some families, First Nations families that I've been connected with since my childhood in my community. I went to school. There was kids coming from Sandy Bay to school in Gladstone when I was in grade 1 and 2 and whatever. To this day, I have no idea why they were there. Yeah. And I've never asked. And they're either gone, or the one that I always kept in contact with at Sandy Bay, she's deceased. But it really hit me. There was a young man from Sandy Bay in my posts, and he kind of made a couple of comments when I was doing these posts relating to, school. And his last name was Bolio. And I said to him, "Who are your parents?" And he told me, and I said, "I kind of thought so. I went to school with your mom." And he said, "Really?" My mom always really liked Gladstone. She always talked about Gladstone, really liked Gladstone. And he said, "I never knew why." And it just for this young guy to think that then I was Indigenous minister and an MLA, to think that his mom had gone to school with me, and I held her in high regard. We were good friends. And he was kind of proud of that. He felt really good about it. And those are the connections. That's what makes a difference, is just recognizing, and it's the comments we make to one-on-one, into individuals. And I think to bring an elder into the schools and listen to their stories, they are so interesting. They're amazing. I went to Turtle Lodge at Sag King First Nations 3 different times, Fort Alexander in English terms, and listened to the teachings, the 7 sacred teachings, which aren't much different than our biblical 10 commandments.
No.
But they learned them before there was ever a Bible.
Yeah.
And that's what they lived by. They still abide and live by that. Do they all live by that? No.
No.
Do all our people follow the Christian faith or any faith? No. So who are we to criticize? But I still see that there's so much opportunity that, and that's just being a good citizen. That's not going out of your way. That's just living with a bit of kindness and compassion
towards people.
No effort.
Very interesting, Eileen. And back to the current situation in terms of the leadership race.
Mm-hmm.
Who are is there 4? You said yesterday 4 contestants.
There are 4 candidates. Now that will be determined, defined definitely on the 15th, which is next week. By the 15th next week, each candidate has to have 1,000 memberships, new or renewed, and they have to have a deposit of $25,000 to the PC party. It's my understanding they get a portion of that back, perhaps, but they have to have the 1,000 memberships.
So if they don't sell 1,000 memberships,
they do
cannot
not qualify.
Be a candidate. They don't qualify.
They do not qualify. So
and this is new.
No, this is not new.
This has been.
I think the threshold of dollars is new. But, there's been a lot in the newspaper saying, this is outrageous. How can anybody come in and just get 1,000 memberships or $25,000? It's not outrageous at all. In 2015, when I was campaigning as for the nomination in Agassiz, I spent $13,500. My husband invested. He told me, he said, when I was debating, he said, "I'm going to invest $10,000 in you, and I think it'll be worth it." And I kind of was like, "Whoa, you're going to invest in me? Like, what do you mean?" He said, "I'm investing $10,000 in you." And then $3,500 came in from individuals. I never solicited money at all, but I could have had a lot more. I turned it down because I didn't feel I needed it.
Yeah.
But I did use that much. But when you do gas and we did coffees and some advertising, it takes dollars to campaign. And I was able to sell almost 900 memberships with very little effort in about 6 weeks, which was amazing. And, for instance, one of the candidates that is running is Shelley Glover, a former member of Parliament.
She is running
for the leadership.
Yeah.
Now, for her, 1,000 memberships and $25,000 should be absolutely easy, because the ridings for members of Parliament are much greater, and she can access from all across Manitoba. So for her, as an individual, I have a caucus colleague, Shannon Martin, that is also running. He's also very accustomed to collecting memberships. We are absolutely forced to do that every year. We have an obligation. We sign a document saying we will collect memberships on a regular basis, and we will promote financially our party. We have a threshold that we have to raise every year, and it is $25,000. So, I mean, that is not out of the way at all for any of the candidates. And there's a 4th candidate that has come in just this past week. His name's Ken Lee. He's from Winnipeg. He's an accountant. So
who was that one?
Ken Lee.
Ken Lee.
Yeah. So there is 4 candidates. Now
So he hasn't a seat in the...
No, 2 out of the 4 do not currently hold seats. So, and there are no seats available. The Premier, post Premier has not given up his seat in his constituency, nor does he have to. He can do that whenever he chooses. So that's an interesting thing to consider. But next week, on the 15th, we will know which candidates have met the threshold
Yes.
to be accepted, and there has to be a criminal check and other checks as well. You have to be a citizen in good standing, no criminal records or those types of things. And then we have until the 30th of September to actually sell more memberships. And the reason for selling the memberships, that membership is actually your vote. This is not where all of Manitoba votes. You have to hold PC party membership, $20 to vote. And one thing that was decided that this will be a mail-in ballot because of the threat of the 4th wave of COVID, so that there would be no rules changing midstream or at the last minute to confuse people. We already have one election coming up on the 20th. It gets very confusing, and people don't need more confusion right now. So, 4 candidates. 15th is cutoff for them to register and be accepted, and the 30th is the cutoff to purchase a membership, and they have 1 month after that to campaign. The election is actually on October 30th.
So if Ken Lee or Shelley Glover were to win, that means we could have an interim premier for the continuation of this term.
It could be.
If there was no by-election.
If there was no by-elections between now and the call of the next provincial election, they would have to do what Dougald Lamont did and sit up in the gallery. That's right. Yeah, it's a unique situation. And we found out yesterday too, someone said, you know, it is almost historical for the province, the people of Manitoba, to vote specifically for a premier. And apparently this did happen in Duff Roblin's day. He stepped down, and I believe it was Walter Weir that was elected in, and then he lost government after that. So it's not a good thing, as Heather said yesterday. She would not hope to do that. But it's an interesting process, and again, a learning experience. I've never been through this type of a candidacy and an election. So it's a different time. So the only thing is, it does curtail our fall session. We should be going back on October the 3rd. And it's my understanding government is prorogued until after the day of the
Which
election.
Is the 30th of October.
30th of October.
So we'll know. And at this point in time, Brian Pallister has not indicated that he may step down from Fort White constituency.
We have no idea if and when that's his decision, if and when he does.
I'm just thinking about raising campaign funds. Remember a number of years ago, there was a legislative movement come through the government of the day, whereby there was so much money taken out of the government budget determined by the number of votes you got. Do you remember that, Eileen?
I wasn't familiar with it back then, but I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, and there has been changes in that.
Yes, there have.
Now, Premier Pallister put through legislation that, I shouldn't say Premier Pallister, our government, because we all voted on it, whereby I think the amount of dollars coming back after an election, there would be money coming back to us as candidates, but also to the government, whether they won or were opposition. The amount of funds came back, but some of that funding came back. So, and typically, like even for Agassiz, typically an election that I would have spent would be around between $20,000 and $25,000, and that's pretty modest. You know, you're told how much you can spend depending on your capacity, but you know, it does cost money to run elections. So, yeah.
But it always seemed that the Conservative Party has an upper hand in terms of campaign fundraising compared to what other parties.
They do, but that's one thing Premier Pallister really insisted on, that we do our due diligence and we collect those memberships and we collect the funding that is expected. we sign an oath saying that we will do that. And he made sure that the money, we had to raise our own money to be sustainable in government. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
I never had a problem until the last year or so. Collecting memberships in Agassiz this last year or so, been very difficult. People were dissatisfied with our government, a lot because of COVID, but other reasons as well. They were dissatisfied with our premier, and that's another thing that I knew going forward. I would have a very hard time continuing meeting my financial and membership goals in Agassiz the way things were going. And that didn't sit well with me either, because I never slouch on my obligations, and it was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
So,
one thing I'd like our viewers to consider is the percentage of people that are eligible to vote in an election is quite low, in my opinion, compared to the number of eligible voters.
mm-hmm.
Is there something you could share with us and our viewers, Eileen, that might encourage some people that have never voted before to get out and vote?
Well, I think just talking about it, raising awareness. In the 2019 election, I'm really proud that Agassiz had the third highest percentage of voters per capita.
I didn't know that.
Yes, we did. And I got a lot of calls from a lot of seniors who obviously really care about that. To me, I never kind of really thought about it. They were so proud that Agassiz was just below Winkler Morden and Steinbach, and Agassiz was in number 3 position. I really acknowledge that now, but right now, man, we're sure not there. So I've got a lot of hard work to do. But I think encouraging people, Jody and I made a lot of phone calls prior to the election to get out and vote.
Yeah.
And people did. They did it. And you know what? We shared that victory. You could feel that people took ownership of that victory.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And one of the nicest compliments I got after the day of the election was from the Liberal candidate in Agassiz, Hector Swanson, and he sent me the most beautiful note, brought tears to my eyes, and good for him at his age, stepping up and running so proudly, but to congratulate me in such a respectful way. It was an incredible election, and I have been treated so well by the people of Agassiz.
And that's that respect and working together as
But
people.
again, it's not a tough job. It's so easy to do because Jody and I just go out and do what we enjoy, and it's more like fun, but we love what we do. So yeah.
Well, there's a lot of other things we could talk about besides the election and politics and the leadership race. I'm going to ask you, Eileen, is there some things that come to your mind that we haven't discussed today? Is there a message that you would like to leave with our viewers that might resonate? A responsibility and awareness to get out and vote and do the things required to be a respectful citizen of this province and to help work together.
Yeah. Thanks, Lyle. That's a really generous opportunity. I think Manitobans, for the part, have gone through a very, very difficult time because of COVID, and the drought now has not helped. There's a lot of hurdles for us to get past. There's a lot of hurt, physically and emotionally. But I think traveling with the other Heather Stephenson yesterday, and the word she used over and over again was hope. And that's what I've tried to do for a year and a half in my daily posts as well, which aren't quite so daily right now, but just to ensure to people that there is hope. And that's what I've come to realize through my posts as well. A lot of people struggle every day. A lot of people struggle for a specific time period in their life. And now we've all struggled together for a very long time. But you know what? There is always hope. We must never forget. And we need to remind each other that there's hope. We need to be kind to each other. We need to encourage each other. And sometimes that encouragement has to come in different ways. And we're all capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something we just normally don't maybe do. It's maybe a thank you. It's maybe just an encouraging word, a smile. Under a mask, you don't see much of a smile. But, I think hope is the big word here. And I'm really encouraged now that we are looking forward to new leadership in our government. I feel really positive about that. I think there's a lot can be accomplished. I know my colleagues. I'm really excited that we are all joining to support our particular candidate, our colleague, Heather Stephenson, because we do trust her and we do respect her, and she has a lot to offer that she has not always been able to put out there either. And I think people will be so surprised at a totally different tone, not aggressive, not confrontation. They want our governments to get along. They want us to do our work, and they want to be able to trust us. And I think if I send out a message to everybody today, it's like, support us. We need support too. We need those prayers that we've been getting a lot. And but sometimes we need to be told too, if something's good, tell us, because that just fires us up to do even better. So hope, friendship, kindness. You can be in government and still be kind, and and respect goes a long way, and truth goes a long way.
Eileen, thank you for those words, and thank you for your commitment and work in the Agassiz constituency. And we wish you, and I'm pleased to hear that you have a clear mind and heart going forward for the remainder of this term. And we wish you well and good health, happiness, and success in the future going forward. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today. It's
been an absolute pleasure. It always is. And I'm looking forward to better months ahead for all Manitobans and all of Canada. Actually, we need some good vibes.
We do. And you certainly have offered some good vibes today through your comments. Thanks. And thank you for your joining us. And we look forward to a future coffee chat down the road when things settle down and the leaders determined and some of the elections are over. And
maybe a whole new set of issues.
That's right. So we'll get an update. Hopefully, you'll take time in your schedule.
Absolutely. Always happy to come here. Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Eileen. Well, that concludes our coffee chat today, and again, we thank our local MLA, Eileen Clarke, for joining us, and we thank you for taking the time to watch our NAC TV programs, in particular this coffee chat program. If you have any suggestions or concerns or comments about our programming, please feel free to call our office here at 476-2639. Until next time, my name is Lyle Watson, and have a good day and stay healthy and happy.